welcome to the program today. I'm Layo Adegoke. The International Committee of the Red Cross, ICRC, says efforts to deliver vital medical aid into the war-torn Ethiopian region of Tigray remains limited. This is despite a humanitarian truce agreed between the government and rebel forces last week. The aid organizations say it has been allowed to airlift medical supplies into Tigray since January this year. That's after months of restriction. But it says none of its aid trucks have moved to the region as roads continue to have security and access issues. 38 flights carrying desperately required medical supplies have arrived in Tigray over the last 3 months. Relief agencies have long accused the government of implementing a de facto blockade, something Addis Ababa denies. Well, the Red Cross now says allowing trucks to enter the region will boost the organization's capacity significantly. Let's have some discussion on this story. Joining us now is Olatunji Lanre, a human rights activist. Thank you for speaking to us on Network Africa.
Thank you for having me.
Well, when news broke about the truce last week, in Tigray to allow essential aid that's needed to the victims, many welcomed it. But now there are reports that this access is limited. What do you make of this?
It was disappointing. There's a balloon of excitement that came in the air when the announcement was made that a truce had been reached. But that has since been punctured by this hostility or disagreement. And right now we are past, we've gone past the point where we ascribe blame to one party or the other. The most fundamental and most important thing is how to get the needed aid and humanitarian intervention to the people who are in need of it inside of Ethiopia and also on the side in the Tigrayan region. And the challenge here is fundamentally, if you are seeking to do intervention, there are 3 key things that have to be in place. You need to have a defined time for the humanitarian aid to go in. And you also you need to have the agreement and cooperation and collaboration of all the parties in a conflict. And we thought we had that. Besides that, the route through which the aid has to go into the Tigrayan region also has to be pre-agreed with all the parties so that there will be no mistaken hostility or bombardment on that convoy. But right now, there is nothing the humanitarian community can do. There's nothing the ICRC or the Red Cross can do in accessing the Tigrayan region unless that truce is enforced or is declared and implemented. But right now, the challenge is we need a much more powerful body, a neutral body to do this intervention. I know the United Nations have been involved in all the communication happening in there, but it is about time that much more political will, much more political push has to be placed on the table to nudge the government in Ethiopia. African Union has been practically disappointing in this, and I know that you have to also respect the integrity, the sovereignty of the Ethiopian Federation as it is. But where you have an humanitarian disaster like this with about 1.5 million people in their need, and we cannot even prevail on the Ethiopian government, which is a host to the African Union, to allow an humanitarian corridor to people who are in need. It is very disappointing and heartbreaking for everybody, for us as players in the sector, and also when you look at it, it's an indictment on also the political will of the African Union.
Well, you've actually, spoken a little on my next question, which was, the role African Union can play, since you say the ICRC can't do much in this. But this humanitarian aid is one thing that, is desperately needed. We have medical supplies, food, toiletries that these victims need. This war has been for about 2 years now. So who would we say should be held responsible for these limitations, for this denial of aid access?
You know, both parties will take in the blame. One, you know, the rebels in the Tigrayan region, also the Ethiopian government, which has practically been intransigent, you know, intransigent in the sense that they have played the difficult ball since the commencement of this crisis. And you understand why a legitimate government, a sovereign government with all authority in a particular country will play hardball, because the rebels will be seen as what they are, rebels. It's like an insurgency, you know. If you situate, put that in Nigeria as it stands right now, and we are talking about, maybe militants in the Niger Delta back in those days, you realize that people prevail on the Nigerian government to allow for negotiation. If the Nigerian government had objected, it was also within the constitutional and legitimate power of the Nigerian government to object. But, you know, on the moral and the humanitarian side, they will be indicted for, you know, allowing the crisis to get protracted and, you know, prolonged. But here, back to the issue of the African Union and the Ethiopian government, blame goes to her side because they have been killing and human rights violation on both sides of the conflict. And that's why a neutral body, a body with authority and leverage, will have to intervene. But the African Union has not been able to use its diplomatic and political will to persuade the government. President Olusegun Obasanjo, former Nigerian president, had been, you know, at the forefront of this negotiation. He succeeded up to a point, but you know, the evidence of the success is access, and we have not been able to get that right now. If we bring in the United Nations, exerting control over the Ethiopian government is also going to be a complicated thing. So diplomacy will have to be brought to the fore. But how far we will go with that, if we have been dragging with this for the past 2 years, is left to be seen. I'm just disappointed that what we saw as a ray of hope, as an opportunity to, you know, to save a lot of lives. There will be people who have died over the last 72 hours, over the last 48 hours, and even in the last 24 hours because of lack of access to medical supplies. Indeed. And you consider also the plight of the women who are in those regions who need basic toiletries, basic sanitary wares. Indeed. It's going to be very challenging going forward.
Indeed, we do hope, you know, there's immediate access to people in Tigray. But thank you so much, Olatunji Lanre Barua, human rights activist. Thank you for your thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you. Anytime.
Aid groups say millions more Sudanese are at risk to go hungry this year as economic turmoil and erratic rains reduce harvest. Now, it's a problem that has been compounded by a halt to foreign assistance and even the war in Ukraine. The rising levels of hunger forecast by United Nations agencies threaten to further destabilize a country that's already suffering a growing conflict and also poverty following a military takeover last year. Sudan has been mired in an economic crisis since before the overthrow of Omar al-Bashir in an uprising in 2019. The transitional government attracted billions of dollars in international support that was suspended after the coup, placing Sudan on the brink of economic collapse.
Because the issue really is that the war in Ukraine will make everything worse for everyone, right? So not just in Sudan, but all over the world, food prices will go up because Russia and Ukraine are such big producers of cereals. Also, the price of oil will go up because, again, Russia is it's the second biggest exporter of oil in the world. So with this inflation, it will increase, it will exacerbate the situation of already vulnerable populations, like those living in the margins in Sudan, whether they're on the border with Ethiopia in the refugee camps, or they are in displaced camps in Darfur. So these people really living on the margins, they're really going to suffer as a result of this.
The Ukrainian embassy, I beg your pardon, in Kenya is seeking donations to support the country's war against Russia and save the lives of affected people. The embassy said the initiative followed many requests it had received from Kenyans keen on donating to the cause. 2 fundraising bank accounts have now been opened, and also an account on M-Pesa, that's the mobile money transfer system. The latest UN figures show more than 4 million people have left Ukraine since Russia's invasion. Kenya was among 141 countries that voted in favor of a UN resolution that condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine and called for the immediate withdrawal of its forces. At least 20 members of Tunisia's parliament who took part in an online session in defiance of President Kais Saied have been summoned by an anti-terrorism unit for investigation. The parliament speaker, Rached Ghannouchi, made this known, adding that those summoned include members of his own Islamist Ennahda party, as well as other lawmakers. Wednesday's parliament session was the first since the president announced last year that he was suspending the chamber as he moved to one-man rule in measures his critics have called a coup. President Saied responded to the session overnight by dissolving the chamber and ordering investigations into the more than half of the parliament members who took part of the session. Relations between Nigeria and the United States continues to expand as the U.S. government begins construction of what would become the largest U.S. Consulate General in the world. Using the best technology, the 10-story chancery will become a symbol of sustainability when it is completed in 2027. Our Foreign Affairs correspondent, Amarachi Ubani, was at the groundbreaking ceremony and now reports.
While it may not be the first occupant of Lagos State's futuristic hub, the Eco-Atlantic City, the U.S. mission in Nigeria assures that when completed, its new Consulate General in Lagos will be magnificent and will be green.
Just as Eco-Atlantic City emerged from the Atlantic Ocean through diligent engineering, you will soon see the new U.S. Consulate emerging from this site with the best in American engineering and construction practice, from its foundation that supports the constraints of building on reclaimed land, to stormwater improvements designed to prevent pollution, control runoff, and mitigate flood risk.
Present at the groundbreaking ceremony of the $537 billion campus are the man who birthed the Eco-Atlantic City, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, partners, Nigerian-Lebanese businessmen Ronald and Gilbert Shagori, the Lagos State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu, the U.S. Ambassador Mary Beth Leonard, the Consul General Claire Pierangelo, the construction company Panix Group, representatives of American businesses in Nigeria, members of Nigeria's business community, and members of the diplomatic corps. Governor Sanwo-Olu attributed the decision to establish the structure to America's confidence in investments in the state and the opportunity this portends for both sides.
We wholeheartedly welcome it, this groundbreaking event, and it's bringing a new chapter in our bilateral journey. When it's completed, this new campus will represent a boundless new opportunity for Nigerians and Americans that do come into this facility.
According to the U.S. Ambassador to Nigeria, the new consulate, which vision has been years in the making, will be the only U.S. consulate with a boat dock, will showcase local and international art pieces, and will be managed by 20 Nigerian engineers, with benefits on the side for workers and staff of the consulate.
It will employ 2,500 Nigerians for 5 or more years on this project. We will infuse upwards of $90 million into the local economy through employees, local subcontractors, and suppliers. All employees will receive health and safety training. In short, our new consulate will make a major contribution to the economy of Lagos State and Nigeria broadly, and be a powerful symbol of our commitment to developing the expertise of Nigerians.
Though she's overseen the start of the consulate in her tenure as Consul General, Mrs. Claire Pierangelo will soon be leaving for her new assignment in Madagascar.
I absolutely will be back in 2027 for the launch. I have to see it in action and experience it after all this anticipation and all this planning. And I helped buy the property and I helped start the project, so I've got to come back and see the final version.
The U.S. Bureau of Overseas Building Operations had back in October last year announced the Design Build Award for the new Consulate General. The 12.2-acre site is expected to provide the future diplomatic campus and its neighbors with access to sustainable, modern infrastructure, including an 8.5-kilometer seawall designed to protect the city from rising sea levels and coastal erosion.
The spike in global fuel prices linked to the Ukraine war hit Liberia as the Ministry of Transport set up roadblocks across the West African nation to inspect vehicle registration documents, driver's licenses and insurance coverage, leading to massive traffic jams daily. Or some commercial drivers have decided to park their vehicles because they can't afford to buy petrol, while others have had to increase the prices they charge passengers.
A spike in global fuel prices linked to the Ukraine war hit Liberia just as the Transport Ministry launched its annual vehicle inspection this month, leading to massive traffic jams and grief for drivers across the West African country. Some commercial drivers have decided to park their vehicles because they can't afford to buy petrol, while others have had to increase the prices they charge passengers. According to local media, 2 weeks after the start of the Ukraine crisis, the government of Liberia increased the pump price of gas from $3.90 a gallon to $5.66 and commenced traffic inspection to ensure that all vehicles are registered. This led to a hike in transportation fares for passengers.
Unfortunately, when you charge the passenger, they always say you're exploiting them. They are forgetting that you need money to get gas. When you put gas in the car to go to the center town and come back, you need that money, and 1 gallon cannot take you to town because of the traffic.
According to Davis, before the inspection and increase in fuel prices, he used to make over 6 trips daily, but now he hardly makes 3 trips due to traffic congestion. Fuel prices have soared to record highs in many countries around the world this month, driven by a rebound in fuel demand since the darkest days of the coronavirus pandemic and supply disruptions in the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Like many other drivers, Davis said the government should wait until fuel prices go down before carrying out its annual inspection, which involves setting up checkpoints to verify drivers' vehicle registration, driver's licenses and insurance documents. Transport Inspector Roosevelt Blamo said he saw nothing wrong with the ongoing hike in price and inspections.
People refuse to do their registration. People buy big cars and don't want to register it. So how do you think government will carry on development? All the projects government is carrying on, how do you think they generate funds? It's through taxations. So Liberians need to pay their tax. The times are not hard. Because if you go to the nightclubs, you see Liberians buying 4, 5, or 6 crabs of stouts, but you don't want to register your car for the government to raise revenue. So times are not hard.
For now, inspections continue, and Davis says he is struggling to find enough money to properly feed his family.
In South Sudan, the UN's deputy chief and resident coordinator of the mission in the country has announced plans to modernize the cultivation scheme in Awale, South Sudan. In her visit to Awale, northern Bahr el Ghazal, Sarah Nyati, deputy special representative for the Humanitarian for the United Nations mission in South Sudan, visited the historic rice scheme, a mechanized system that sought to modernize sustainable farming practices by using tractors for preparing and planting farmlands, launched as far back as 1944.
The interest is to see that the people of South Sudan, and particularly in this case, the people of Bahr el Ghazal, that they reach their fullest development potential, that the children in this state can dream, and they won't feel that they don't have a right to dream. everyone will do their part, and I want to challenge you to do your part to double your increase, your yield, and make sure you have enough that you produce so that the mill will work and that you will be able to not only feed yourself but feed this nation.
Welcome to our Africa Tech segment. Since 2017, startup funding across Africa has grown tremendously, with startups raising more money across funding deals. Well, the success recorded by some startup founders and the increased focus on entrepreneurship has boosted the drive of many to also engage in this space. But most of these trailblazing stories came to light mainly because of the amount of funding received. While some startups choose to bootstrap their operations, others simply seek to raise from investors.